Welcome back to Home Studio Production Basics. This is a series all about helping you up the value of content you create in a home studio situation. This is episode number 10, and it's a simple yet difficult question to try and answer here. Should you be buying and should you be using a dynamic or a condenser microphone in your home studio setting? Let me begin with my premise on all of this as it relates to microphones. They are like golf clubs. Now, what do I mean by that? Some people could see them as all the same, like those are all golf clubs. They all hit golf balls, and it's as simple as that. Use one this time, another that time. What does it really matter? But if you golf, you know how much club selection matters. And I mean the obvious stuff, right? You would never use a driver on the putting green, and you would never use your putter to hit the tee shot, and there's wedges, and there's irons and woods, and it's the same thing with microphones. Like, that's a U87AI, and that's a Shure SM7B. They're both microphones, but they're both very different in what they do and how they help you accomplish something. So yeah, let's be very clear here. A mic is not just a mic. It's very specific in what you're trying to do with it, how you're going to use it, and I think most importantly, where you're going to use it, like what type of room and what type of setting to get the most out of every microphone in the same way you would a golf club. Okay, now that that's been established, let's get into the condenser microphone characteristics here. Number one, they typically have lots of detail. Condensers hear so well to the point that sometimes they pick up nose whistling and like mouth noises and saliva. Yeah, maybe too much detail. In fact, if you close talk it, sometimes too much detail. But they hear well, they hear everything, and they also have what I'll call a crisp frequency response curve. Crisp meaning that usually the high and the low ends of that spectrum are pronounced. So you do get kind of the boomy, bassy tones of a voice or anything else on the lower edge, but the crispness is what stands out the most. For example, if you listen to a condenser for a couple minutes or a couple hours, and then you were to hear a dynamic microphone on the same voice, it would kind of sound muffled, almost to the point that you thought somebody put some socks over that dynamic microphone, when it's just the fact that the condenser has and transmits and translates a way more detailed, high present sound. That's what condenser mics typically do. They tend to run on phantom power. They also tend to be a little bit more fragile than their dynamic counterparts. For example, this is a Sennheiser MD46. You could hammer a nail with this thing. You could use this on stage. You could throw it. You could drop it. I would never want that to happen to the Neumann U87AI or any other large diaphragm condenser mic. These ones are usually living on a studio arm for all their lives in a controlled environment. They're not packed around and moved or anything like that. Dynamics, yeah, they're a little bit more robust and durable. And I don't mean to say fragile like I think this will break tomorrow. This microphone could last 50 to 70 years. I mean, a lot of the U87s have. But condensers, you typically don't want to expose them to as much. Let's just say it like that. Last characteristic I want to point out here, less self-noise for a condenser versus a dynamic microphone. A little bit of that has to do with the lesser amount of gain that's required for a condenser because it's using phantom power. So what I mean by less self-noise is that here on a condenser, when I'm quiet, you don't hear much. Maybe even the airplane flying overhead at this very moment. Okay. Dynamic microphones. Let's get into their characteristics. Usually more side and rear rejection, right? So here in the home studio, it doesn't really matter because there's no noise over there or here or above or below. But if I were out somewhere, in a crowded environment and I was talking to somebody and I only wanted to hear what I was saying or what they were saying, this dynamic would reject a lot of the noise around us, and it would pick up what is right in front of it. Dynamics also typically tend to have more of a flatter tone, and I don't necessarily mean that the frequency response curve is entirely flat. What I'm saying is those highs and lows I talked about before with the condenser, those are not usually as pronounced. You don't get that sizzly type sound from a dynamic microphone. A little bit more gain is required. I said before that also induces some self-noise on occasion. That's true, and it depends on what preamp and microphone combo you're using. Typically on a condenser, you might be gained up anywhere from 20 to 35 dB, and a dynamic microphone, you might be gained up 45 to 60 or more, depending on the microphone and the situation. I've already said how much more durable dynamics typically are. Don't hold me to that. Don't do anything stupid on purpose. And yeah, more self-noise because of the more gain that a dynamic microphone requires. So, when might you use a condenser? When might you use a dynamic? Let's start answering the question here. I would use a condenser for things like whispering or ASMR videos, right? Because this microphone can hear everything. It picks up all the detail, all of that stuff. If I was talking into my SM7B right now, I just don't think it would sound as good. It just wouldn't. So whispering, ASMR, voice acting, again, because of the detail, right? It picks up more of the higher end frequencies. It just hears better. Broadcast, you put a little compression on this. Actually, you put a lot of compression on this, and it sounds like broadcast. Stage, I could see it working there. You know, if you really want the audience to have a real natural type sound. Promo and voiceover, condensers are largely used there. But the most important part of all of this, you want to use a condenser in a treated room because it hears everything. You put this microphone in a reverberant room and it's going to sound terrible. You're going to say, wait, that's an expensive, highly sought after microphone? No, it sounds terrible. No, the room sounds terrible and it hears so well, it's hearing what the room sounds like. So you're really, and this might help you start answering your question, is your room treated or not? Because if it's not, I wouldn't suggest any type of condenser microphone necessarily. And when I say treated, what types of things do you have to knock down the sound so that it doesn't reflect all over a room and then come back into the microphone? When would I use a dynamic microphone? Typically, they can handle louder sound pressure levels, so things like yelling or singing, loud settings, a stadium, a sporting event. In fact, this MD46 by Sennheiser, this was literally invented by Sennheiser at the request of NBC for their coverage of the 2000 Sydney Olympics. Yeah, more than 20 years ago. But dynamic, obviously, that's why they chose it. Dynamics are great for singing, loud settings, less treated rooms because they just reject. They reject the sound and the echoes from around the sides much better. And so that's why they are a little bit more optimal. I've also said here for long form, for long form listening, I think if you listen to an audiobook on a condenser mic and it wasn't EQ'd and it had this real, again, all of this I'm talking about just raw, without EQ, without processing. If you just listen to this microphone for a long period of time, without any processing, without any reduction of the highs and lows and low cutting, I think it might get fatiguing, right? So I think long form, if you had no EQ, you just had to go with something, a dynamic might be your better choice. And then mission critical, yeah, like, again, you could drop this, it could be in your bag, it could fall out. This is just a little bit more robust. And if you always know, and doesn't require phantom power, if you want less things to possibly go wrong, go with a dynamic microphone. But the most important thing here that I want to pass along, I hope you've lasted this long in the video, all 9 minutes plus so far. Don't think that a dynamic microphone is going to be your complete fix for bad acoustics. I've told you before that if your room is not treated, yeah, probably get a dynamic. But don't think that, oh, well, I got a dynamic, my room is fixed. Not it whatsoever. Any mic, dynamic or condenser, is only going to be as productive as your room is, right? Even a dynamic's going to hear what a bad room sounds like. High ceilings, tile floors, nothing on the walls, sound bouncing all around, echoey, whatever. But also bad mic technique, right? If you're holding this thing this far away, I mean, watch. The U87 doesn't sound so good right now, does it? No, because that would be terrible mic technique. So don't think that any dynamic or condenser are going to fix your bad acoustics or fix your bad mic technique. I hear this a lot. Well, use a dynamic because, I mean, it does have better noise rejection typically, but that's not going to entirely fix your bad acoustics. It might fight some of them and help some of them, but it's not here to fix the problem. Okay, now that I've got that off my chest, hopefully that answers the question for you. If you're going to go the full mile and you're going to treat your room and you're going to record in a great space, go for a condenser. I think that's going to be the better option for you. But if you're not going to put in the extra legwork, if you're going to be recording in different spots, tough spots that you don't have control over, yeah, a dynamic might be your best bet. Hopefully some of that helped. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments section below.